Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels football recruiting podcast here on Tar Heel Illustrated. And if you are watching us on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of football recruiting and jack of all trades, Miss Deana King. And before we dive into what we're going to discuss today, Deana, I just want to remind everybody, if you want all of Deana's insight, which is a lot more than we get on these podcasts, and David Sisk's insight on basketball recruiting, which is a lot more than we do on podcasts, and so much other stuff. So much of our content is premium. Our message boards have been on fire lately. We have a lot of great posters who have a lot of very interesting thoughts, including Jimmy Naismith, who grinds down stats like nobody I've ever seen before. That is all on premium, and you can have access to that for just $8.33 a month. Just go over to TarHeelIllustrated.com, sign up. 1-year membership makes you an insider for a whole year for just $8.33 a month. So, Deana, big recruiting weekend for Carolina football. All the attention on the surface was paid to the basketball team blowing out NC State, to Roy Williams being honored, and the 82 team and some dude named MJ was on hand and had the players certainly, as Leaky Black called it, starstruck with MJ hanging out there. In fact, there's a great photo that UNC put out of Hubert and Roy hugging in the locker room after the game, and off over the side, you can see MJ with a big smile. And to the left of Hubert and Roy is Brady Manick, and he's just staring at MJ. And I'm thinking, he came to Carolina for that experience, so that's pretty cool. But also very cool this weekend were the parade of football prospects on hand. Unfortunately, since things were running late, they didn't get to intro them where they come out of the visitors tunnel, walk along the baseline, then go up into the stands and take their place, which is not far from where I sit on my media spot at the home games. So we didn't have a ton of photos of the kids. So that forced Miss King to be highly resourceful to make sure you knew who was there. And if Jacob did go over and get some photos of some of those kids, but a lot of them were there, and we're going to discuss those kids, many of whom you've already spoken to. So let's kind of dive into it, Deana. A lot of kids on campus, some big-time 2024 offers, some big-time 2023 offers. Let's start with the 23 kids. Christian Hamilton is someone we've been talking about for over a year. I remember about a year and a half ago at one of the VTO camps, I believe it was, or some other camp that you were at, he was there, and you told me he's going to be a big-time player. Let's keep an eye on Christian Hamilton. Well, he's a 23. He's sought after by a lot of people. He was at Carolina this weekend. So give us a little bit on Christian Hamilton and his visit. We'll dive into a few other 23 kids as well.
Seems like I've been talking about some of these kids forever because they actually had 2 football seasons back in 2021, sandwiched within like 7-on-7. And he's a big 7-on-7 guy, played at with the Carolina Stars. And they have probably the best 7-on-7 program in the area and everything. They had a lot of big-time players that have played for the Carolina Stars. But Christian Hamilton, he's one of the top kids in the state and has been to Carolina several times. I know whenever he decides to do a top list, I'm pretty sure that UNC is going to be in that mix because he's been at, like I said, at Chapel Hill so many times. And these kids, they go, when they go on these trips, they go crazy on social media, posting their photo shoot pictures or just hanging out with the other recruits and the coaching staff. But Christian, he's a 4-star wide receiver. I could even say he's an athlete. Could play multiple positions. I mean, he's got a who's who of offer. I know Clemson's really high on him as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what Christian does. But Carolina's been in a great position with him because the kid loves Lonnie Galloway. I mean, any wide receiver I talk to, they just really, really love Lonnie Galloway as a coach, as someone to talk to. They really trust him.
Yeah, and I think that there's some clout, there's some stature for Lonnie Galloway within the walls of the Keenan Football Center. A lot of fans don't know about, and the tag that he's been given by Mac. And I'll be honest with you, I saw Mac a couple of times on Saturday, kind of going through the stands, and he enjoys when people call out to him, and he's so gracious with it. And Lonnie Galloway was with him each time. So I think the kids understand where Lonnie is in the pecking order within the walls of the Keenan Football Center. Michael Doherty is a kid that we read a piece on a couple of days ago that you caught up with. He's a 4-star defensive back. I didn't know much about him until you sent me the piece and started talking about him a little bit this weekend. So kind of fill everybody in with him. And what did he tell you about his visit for Junior Day?
He's a big-time safety out of talent-rich Georgia, and anytime now a Georgia kid shows a lot of attention to UNC, you gotta eat it up by his social media and by talking to him. He was really excited about coming up and being in that environment. I mean, every kid I talked to, I asked them about the environment in the Smith Center, because North Carolina has something that a lot of schools don't have, and that's using their basketball traditions and alumni
to pageantry.
Yeah, to showcase some of these kids. I mean, you had the GOAT in the house, Michael Jordan. How many people even saw Michael Jordan in person?
Let me jump in real fast. Because I want to hit on this point. We're going to talk about it later, but we'll go ahead and do it right now. Now, where I sit in section 110, right behind the Carolina bench, up on the concourse. Okay. And if anybody wants to come by and see me during the game, just come by on section 110. You'll see me sitting there with my laptop. But the players, the football recruits, are over to my right. All right. So Carolina has an amazing build up to tip off. It's not very good in football, but it's really good in basketball. It's one of the best, if not the best, I've seen. I've been a lot of places, and there's a lot of pageantry, and it reeks of Carolina tradition and heritage, which makes it so cool. And the kids were every kid I saw, and they had about 45 at least that were there. They all had their phones up and they were videotaping everything, the starting lineups. And then when MJ came out there in the 1982 team, which was, I think, the first TV time out of the second half, all those kids were standing up and they were doing this. So you're right. It is a bonus. It's a big time bonus for the program, because they can give kids a better experience just by having them in that atmosphere. And Saturday was a full house. The place was buzzing. It was hopping, and the team played well. So that was the best case scenario for Mac Brown and the program, to get those kids in the last part of the open period before, which is now a dead period. Yeah.
And, they've not had that the last couple of years because of the COVID and limited the seating in Smith Center. So they've not had that little bonus little recruiting edge there. But back to Doherty, I mean, he is a really good football player, and he has North Carolina in his top list. And in talking with him, he says that they're one of his leaders, and the visit went really well. His dad was really excited about it too. I think maybe his dad was a little bit more excited than Michael, because they went to social media, and here they are standing between Dre Bly and all his accolades, Mac Brown, Gene Chizik, and Charlton Warren. So, I asked him specifically about Chizik and Warren, and great. He says they're great coaches. Warren has been recruiting him a long time, because Warren was at Georgia at one time, and he offered Michael when he was at Georgia and everything. So the relationship there between Warren and Doherty is really strong, and may end up helping North Carolina in the long run.
You've been talking about 4-star offensive lineman Marquee Anderson for some time, and you confirmed not long before, I guess, we recorded this podcast, which is Monday afternoon, that he was for certain at Junior Day. So your thoughts on Marquee Anderson, whatever you learned about his experience at Junior Day, and kind of moving forward, what do you see down the road from him?
Well, I can just tell you, he really wanted to come up to UNC, because he was supposed to he was scheduled to come up the weekend at Georgia Tech in bad weather, and he's down at Dorman High School in South Carolina, and so the weather kind of affected his plan, so he postponed it till this weekend, and he got to come up and experience the game as well, like all of them. They got to see the game and see all the pageantry and everything. But a key, I've just noticed, Andrew, Carolina's really, really, really hit the offensive line group. They have give out a bunch of offers, and people, they can quarrel at Coach Searles and everything like they did this past year. But who's a coach that's got 2 offensive tackles playing in the Super Bowl? The track record
is really good. Without going into a Stacey Searles podcast, the track record's really good, and they're selling it to these kids. And I'll tell you right now, with what happened Sunday, they're selling that part even more to these kids. So Marquee Anderson, I was already well aware about him having a couple of tackles in the Super Bowl.
So he's a South Carolina kid. You know how a lot of South Carolina kids grow up, following Carolina. So I think Marquee's got Carolina up in he's not done a top list, but I would think Carolina would be in that list whenever that time comes.
Joel Starlings, he's a 23 4-star defensive tackle. He didn't make it for Saturday, I believe, but correct me if I'm wrong. He came up for Sunday, which was the last day of the open period. The dead period started Monday the 31st, and it runs through the end of February. So is that when Starlings came up? And if so, tell us what you've learned about him and his visit and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, he came. He was scheduled, tweeted out Sunday. He decommitted from Michigan, so he was he committed to Coach Harbaugh, over late last year, and decided to decommit. And the connections in Virginia. He's from Benedictine School. Chris Collins is from that school. Everyone knows the 2 up, 2 down, the lots of Virginia kids signing with Carolina in the 22 class. So he's a kid that Carolina's really focusing in on, a defensive tackle. They want to build that room up. They've got a great start. They got Travis Shaw in the 22 class, and they've got a lot of very good targets in that 23 class. So Starlings is he got an offer a couple of weeks ago from Carolina, basically when he reopened his recruitment. So he's one that we're going to keep checking in on.
Carolina has one commitment in the class of 2023, and he committed about 6 months ago. And that was Tad Hudson, the quarterback out of the Charlotte area. You talk with Tad again. You've known Tad for quite some time. And I think what the most interesting part of your discussion with Tad that I don't think we've run it yet on the site is who he said that he's helping to recruit, who he's pushing for. And some pretty good names in there. So you might as well, there's a lot of other interesting stuff in that interview, which is a premium interview, of course, but here's one little nugget I think you can go ahead and tell people.
Well, he's a quarterback, the only 23 commit. So you got to start at him as being your quarterback as your leader. And it was no shot that when I asked him who his major targets were, he listed Christian Hamilton, a wide receiver.
He wants to throw
Rodgers,
to him.
Noah Rogers, wide receiver. Those 2 guys are like the top 2 kids in the state and nationally. They're really top kids nationally. Everybody's recruiting him. And then offensive linemen that they've recently offered. I know probably Sullivan Absher is one of those guys. So Tad is recruiting all these offensive guys to help him and bond and everything. So it's a good group and everything. And he's really been firm, commitment. He's been to Carolina several of the games this past year and made it to Chapel Hill. Always says it's a great time when he can come there, building camaraderie with the quarterback room and Coach Longo. So Tad's working hard to help jumpstart this 2023 class.
He wants guys that will protect him and guys that will make him look good, and that makes total sense to me. Let's go to class of 24 for a couple of minutes. Jonathan Paylor's a running back. Again, he's 24, but you've been talking about him for a while. He was in town, so catch everybody up with the latest with Jonathan Paylor.
There's a local kid from Burlington Cummins. I really don't know what they're recruiting him as, because he's just an athlete. He can run. He runs the ball. He can catch the ball, put him out in slot. I mean, he's too good of an athlete. They'll put him somewhere out on the field. But he's been several times to UNC. It seems like I've been talking about him forever. I mean, he had a standout freshman year and then outstanding sophomore year, which both was in the 2021 season. So he made it down, and he's like the other ones. He was just in awe of the atmosphere, when you can see Roy Williams being honored and a banner dropping with his name up there with all those other mega superstars up there in the rafters of the Dean Smith Center. And then you see the all-time greatest basketball player come out. It's just, these kids, they just are in awe. But Paylor, he really likes North Carolina. I mean, you don't go to a place several times unless you really do like them. Mm-hmm. And he's been to Carolina a lot. He's been to NC State. A lot of these kids taking advantage of the proximity of all these schools with Duke and State and Carolina, and they just made a weekend of it. They probably went to the other two schools as well. So it was just a big recruiting weekend for all the schools.
A couple of 24 kids recently offered. Let's begin with Cam Pringle, someone that you have written a lot about. You've talked to him a lot the last couple of weeks. So catch everybody up with him.
I tell you what, there was a picture that circulated on social media with Pringle and Zach Rice. And I told you guys, I'm like, man, yeah. Pringle he makes Zach look a little small. I mean, this dude is 6'7", 305. And I mean, Zach Rice is a pretty big boy himself. So, but he's from South Carolina, and I can just tell, trying to read him, that he really likes North Carolina. And I did an article on him last week when he got offered, that he was really waiting and wanting this Carolina offer, and he took advantage of it and went up to Chapel Hill and got to see all the facilities, which he just bragged on, just top of the line. And you get to go and meet the coaches and sit down and talk one-on-one with Coach Brown. And I'm sure Coach Brown brings out all his, I'm going to call it bling, and his national championship stuff. And so Pringle is, even though he's a 24, I think that he's going to be really firmly, right there, one of Carolina's top targets. Like I mentioned before, they're giving out a lot of offensive line offers, and the kid, he just really enjoyed to speak. He's got a lot of, when he talks about Carolina, you can tell he really likes the Tar Heels.
Do you get the sense that wherever he ends up going, he's one of those kids that may commit kind of early in the process, get it over with, and then lock in on being a part of that culture even before he formally arrives?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, highly impressionable. I mean, I thought it was just something that he went to Zach Rice and, looking for advice, Zach 5-star, one of the top players in the country, could go on anywhere. And I'm not going to give away our article or whatever, but he gave him some great advice. And I think that little relationship, the bond in there, you see that all the time. These younger kids, they kind of follow these guys that they consider bigger brothers or mentors and everything. So it's something that I'm going to keep an eye on, the Zach Rice, Cam Pringle factor.
One of the keys to successful recruiting isn't just having coaches that can recruit. They have to create a culture where the players recruit as well. And certainly Mac Brown has done a really good job of that. Also, a recent offer, Paul Mubanga. I don't know a whole lot about him, but we did run a piece on him about a week and a half ago or so. You've been talking to a ton of these kids here lately. What's the latest on him, and how did his visit go?
He's from Georgia, and he's from Buford, and Buford is one of the Georgia's top programs. So, he's a great football player. Got an offer, like you said, last week. Those offers were going out, but he's a 23 kid. So a late bloomer, starting to get some of the bigger Power 5 schools interested in him. And, this kind of like, North Carolina getting in early with these bloomers. They get a lot of these lower. I hate to use lower, but like he's from Georgia, so Georgia Southern's on him, and Coastal Carolina's on him, and stuff like that. And then, we know this staff has a talent for an eye for talent, and so Carolina offered, and he's got to witness all that, got to see the facilities, and he came away really impressed. Got to talk with Coach Brown and Coach Searles, and got to just hang out with other kids and everything. So he's a kid that we're going to watch and see what he does. A lot of these kids say they're going to come back in March. I know for the big watch party they're going to have when Carolina travels to Duke, they're going to have a big thing there on campus, and several of these kids have been invited. And then a lot of them said they're going to come back and camp when the camp series, Carolina has their camps and stuff. So we'll get to see them, and hopefully we'll get to see a lot of these at Rivals Camp, since it's going to be at a better time for us, and a little bit.
It's the day of the Final Four, though, isn't it?
Well, last with
the weekend
COVID,
of the Final Four,
it was in Atlanta. Our area was in Atlanta, so, and it was it conflicted with a lot of the players in the state playoffs in the spring this 2021 season. So they're coming closer.
Was it also? I'm sorry. Wasn't it also the weekend of the Carolina spring game?
Yeah.
None of us went down there for it.
Yeah. And so it's going to be in Nations Ford, down at Fort Mill, which is a lot closer for a lot of the kids, especially in the eastern part of North Carolina and the Tidewater region, to come down, because it's kind of a regional thing, because the guys in Tidewater, they can go kind of up to northern part when they had something up there, or the Carolina region. So these guys, I can't wait to see some of these guys in person. Like you said, we didn't get any really good pictures of them as they walked in and see these guys, their frames and everything. I would have loved to seen Cam Pringle possibly walk in with Zach Rice and see the reactions of the crowd, like, who in the world is this?
And the crowd does react. And the crowd does react, because the Georgia Tech game, I do a couple of laps in the concourse just to get a feel. I like to get a feel for wherever I go, even for each of the home games, especially now since we don't have a press room until COVID's finally completely gone. So I like to walk the concourse a little bit. And I was walking the concourse before the Georgia Tech game, and all of a sudden I hear this roar. And I'm like, oh, what's that? I duck my head in, and it's the kids going along the baseline. And I see Kevin Roy down there just snapping away, getting pictures. So I would imagine, as nice as the roar was then, for NC State, with more people in the building, a better vibe going on, and more kids and bigger kids, it would have been a pretty cool ovation that they would have gotten. It's unfortunate we didn't get to see that.
Here recently, with the kids coming in, like you said, the crowd, they know who a lot of these kids are, and kids like it. I mean, in covering the 22 class, I mean, Zach and Travis, all of them were talking about how the students were chanting their names, and and that means a lot of these kids. I mean, here's college kids chanting for high school kids. So it's a big recruiting pitch.
Yeah, no doubt. Last thing I want to hit on is if you have to be under a rock in the state of North Carolina if you're not aware of the success that Grimsley High School has had in recent years in Greensboro. And that's where Travis Shaw came from. And I know that we've run a lot of stuff on Jamal Jarrett, someone that you know very well. He's at Grimsley. But there were several Grimsley kids of note that were at Junior Day. So why don't you hit on that for a moment and make sure you talk about Alex Taylor and Terrell Anderson as well.
Yeah, Jamal, he was there, and he's a pleasure to talk to. I mean, a huge joy. He's always he could go to anywhere and have really good words to say with about a program, but he was there, and I haven't talked to him yet, but I know he had a great time. And Alex Taylor and Thompson, what was his first name?
Are you Terrell Anderson?
Terrell Anderson, yeah. Both of them are wide receivers, and they're 24s, and they don't have offers from UNC yet, but 24, they talk about Lonnie Galloway. Taylor he was just really, really pumped up about getting at UNC, and he's really, really anxious and really wants that offer from Carolina. But both of them, being in Grimsley and seeing the recruiting process that Travis went through. I mean, like we mentioned before, Travis is like a mentor to a lot of these guys in Grimsley, just like DJ Reader is a mentor to Travis, and DJ and the Bengals are going to the Super Bowl. So a lot of this family atmosphere building in there at Grimsley. A lot of these guys, they respect Travis, and I expect Taylor and Anderson to be on campus at camps and everything, and especially the way Carolina likes to throw the ball, and they're pretty big, they're pretty tall receivers as well, and that's something that Carolina needs to get some of those guys that has some height on them.
Yeah, need more than they've had for sure. Overall, I would say this was a very good weekend for Carolina. And it's not just, and people need to understand the basketball part is important. And when you're in North Carolina, you could sell that. And I think Carolina does a pretty good job of the programs recognizing that for each other, because there's been a lot of football commits that have, hey, there's Roy Williams, and they work with each other and they help each other. And I think it's a really neat thing. And I love seeing the football kids at the basketball games because they're always having a good time. And the kids this past weekend, that was pretty special. It's special for everybody that was there. When you see MJ, you see Roy get honored the way he was, and just the overall pageantry of it all. You pick a school in part because of the school itself. Not all these kids pick schools just based on football. It's where they want to go to college for 4 years or 5 years. It's the culture of a university, and a big part of the Carolina culture is basketball and basketball pageantry. So, and I think a kid that knows that and is cool with that is going to get a lot out of these junior day visits when there are basketball games going on. So from my vantage point, it was a To quote British Heel, the guy that's been getting all the love who came over, it was a smashing success.
Well,
I guess I shouldn't quote him because he didn't say that, but I imagine he says smashing. So,
well, let's be honest. A kid that grows up in North Carolina, you got to choose between the Blues, and then you got State and Wake Forest, and I'll throw in East Carolina and Appalachian and Charlotte.
If you're from the eastern part of the state, trust me, because I was in Wilmington, worked for the Star News for 10 years, lived there for 5 years. There are a lot of kids that grow up big time ECU fans over there too. So you have to include ECU when it comes to football for sure.
But most of these kids, and to be honest, I mean, when they were born, Carolina basketball, I know Carolina's had some success in football in the 80s and in the 90s when Mac's first tenure, but they grew up. I mean, I've interviewed hundreds to thousands of kids, Andrew, and a lot of them, I'll never forget, some of them said, especially military kids, they followed Carolina because of Carolina basketball, the color. They loved the color. And, it's an iconic color. It's a brand. And Carolina has made very good use of that brand, especially the Jordan brand, this weekend.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, all the football team does all Jordan brand stuff, right? And the guy that is that brand is out there on the court, and he's in the building. So I think that was huge. It was a great job by the staff and how they handled this and got it all together. And they had some big time kids there, Deana. So we'll see.
I know.
We'll see what the
Michael,
is down the road.
I think they blew the roof off the ceiling Saturday with the basketball performance and the guys that they had on the recruiting trip. So,
she's Deana King.
Success.
She's Deana King or Miss King. I'm AJ. And don't forget, guys, just $8.33 a month. You can have access to everything that we do. That means you too can be an insider. So don't forget to go on our site, TarHeelIllustrated.com. Just $8.33 a month. It's dropping the bucket for most people. And hopefully you have a chance to really dive in and be an expert about Carolina football, basketball, and recruiting. She's Deana. Like I said, I'm AJ. We very much appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you.